Before, it seemed like a distant boogeyman that would fade away as quickly as it appeared. But now, the novel coronavirus, COVID-19, is threatening to bring matches in Europe to a grinding halt, as it has done in Italy already. Before we begin, the article aspects of this video are based on originally appeared on The Athletic and was written by Serie A specialist James Horncastle. Head over to www.theathletic.com/RabonaTV to get started with a 7-day free trial and 40% off of your annual subscription. Hi there, I'm Adrian and welcome to Rabona TV, back with The Athletic, round 3. And for our first collaboration, we're taking things to Italy, the epicenter of the coronavirus in Europe, to see how Lega Calcio, or the Serie A, has handled it and how it could affect this summer's competition, Euro 2020. Now, of course, I am not a doctor or virologist. Shock, I know. I am Adrian, a layman. So from one layman to another, unless you're a doctor or a virologist, here is a brief synopsis on the virus. First off, the term coronavirus is an umbrella term for a collection of respiratory viruses, which, according to the World Health Organization, includes Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS, Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome, or SARS, and the newest strain that is yet to be named, simply referred to as the novel coronavirus, or its technical name, COVID-19. Cases first started to crop up in China's Hubei province towards the end of 2019 and have spread outward throughout Asia and now across the globe. According to The Guardian, initial belief was that the virus spread from the Huanan seafood market in Wuhan, as there were live animals present. However, as one of the earliest cases of the virus had no link to said market, the origin is yet to be confirmed. According to the World Health Organization, symptoms include fever, fatigue, and dry cough, which has led to many stating that it seems like a common flu, unless of course you are elderly or have had previous respiratory or immune system issues, in which COVID-19 can be deadly. That said, the mortality rate, at least in China, is estimated to be between 2 and 4%. The incubation period for the novel coronavirus is between 1 to 14 days, in which you may not show symptoms of illness, but you are still contagious, making it an extremely difficult virus to get control of in areas where there have been outbreaks. People can move pretty far in 14 days and come into contact with a lot of other people. Speaking of which, the World Health Organization acknowledges that the virus has been passed along via airborne transmission in some cases in China, but it's most commonly passed on in a human-to-human transmission, coughing, sneezing, stuff like that. So given that, you can see how public spectacles such as football matches with thousands of people attending, all touching the same surfaces, would be an ideal place for the virus to spread. Italy has been the most affected country in Europe. On Sunday, March 1st, it was estimated that there were about 1,700 cases of the novel coronavirus in Italy, but that escalated to over 3,000 cases by the end of the week, almost double. Because of this, with the outbreak being focused mainly in the northern central region, many matches were postponed the weekend of February 22nd and 23rd. Teams from Milan and the Lombardy region, such as Atalanta, all faced postponed Serie A matches, but it leaked into the Uefa competitions as well, as Inter versus Ludogorets was played behind closed doors. The game went ahead behind closed doors as a precaution amid the outbreak of the coronavirus in Lombardy, where, as of the weekend, 984 cases have been reported. Ludogorets were taking no chances when visiting Milan for the second leg of their Europa League tie. They disembarked their plane at Milan's Malpensa airport in masks and kept them on even for the walkaround at the Giuseppe Meazza. But beyond that, it even affected Arsenal's match versus Olympiacos in London. How exactly? The Athletic understands Arsenal asked Uefa about protocol when it was announced an Italian refereeing team would be in charge of their Europa League second leg against Olympiacos at the Emirates Stadium last week. Davide Massa's assistants, Filippo Melli and Alberto Tagoni, are from Lombardy and Emilia-Romagna, the regions with the biggest outbreaks of COVID-19 in Italy, which raised questions at Arsenal about handshakes and spitting on the pitch. Instead of reassurances, UEFA gave them short shrift. So the escalating situation in Italy, with each day bringing news of more cases and more tragic deaths due to the virus, put the onus on the Serie A brass to make a move. Do you prioritize your competition or the public health? Matches in the most affected regions were postponed once again, including the Derby d'Italia or Juventus hosting Inter in Turin. In Milan, it's one of the worst affected areas in the country. The city of Milan is a designated yellow zone, meaning sporting events and other public gatherings have been cancelled. School is out, cinemas and museums are closed, and the faithful can't go to prayers until after March 8th, when the status will be reviewed. And in jumping back to Turin and Juventus, the club has come into contact with the COVID-19 virus, as their under-23 squad has been quarantined after it was found that a team they played against, Pianese, had 4 different players test positive for the virus. Thankfully, according to Horncastle, the under-23 squad trains at a separate facility to that of the first team. But it's still common to see Maurizio Sarri call up some of Fabio Pecchia's players for first-team training and Juventus matchday squads. Last week, for instance, 3 players involved in the 1-0 win against Pianese, Luca Coccolo, Marco Olivieri, and Dauda Peters, worked out with the first team before Juventus flew to Lyon. The example of Pianese and the risk Juventus were exposed to, remember, experts believe the virus has an incubation period of 14 days, vindicated the government's initial recommendation that games be postponed rather than played behind closed doors. Now, teams in the rest of the league have been left frustrated by the indecisiveness of those pulling the Serie A strings. The match is on, the match is off, the match is on, but behind closed doors, which annoys the home team as they miss out on ticket revenue, or the match is called off completely and postponed. Called off and completely postponed without an appropriate amount of warning for those teams that are traveling. In the case of Cagliari traveling to Verona to play against Hellas, their now former coach, sacked on Tuesday, Rolando Maran, said, quote, "We went to bed thinking we had a big game ahead of us and then found ourselves wondering what to do. We were left exhausted." The same thing happened to Fiorentina, who had traveled to Udine for their match, only to find out hours before the match was scheduled to kick off that it had been postponed. Initially, it was to be played behind closed doors, but the constantly evolving situation made even that measure not enough to potentially stop the spread. Same goes for Juventus and their Coppa Italia match against Milan. Sarri had a press conference the day before, but by 8:43 that same evening, the match was postponed to a later date. What's frustrating for these teams is that they are taking risks every time they travel, even if the match is to be played behind closed doors. Hotels, airports, and train stations are some of the last places you would want to be if you're trying to avoid the virus. This, plus the fact that the league hasn't been consistent with its ruling. You can't let some games go ahead and call off others though. Why, for example, was Lazio Bologna allowed to take place in front of 45,000 people and Udinese Fiorentina postponed when, at the time of the games, the respective regions had recorded the same number of COVID-19 cases, 6. Down the road from Udine, second division games went ahead in Cittadella and Venice. Half an hour south of Turin, where the Derby d'Italia between Juventus and Inter was due to take place, Virtus Intella's game against Crotone, across regional lines, received the green light. Fellow Ligurian Sampdoria did not, however, for their match with Verona. The black humor doing the rounds as Serie B must either be immune to COVID-19 or have found a cure. As of March 4th, 2020, the Italian government announced that all sports events in Italy, no matter where they are in Italy, north or south, will be played behind closed doors. As the decree itself says, there will be no sporting events with the presence of the public in order to prevent further contagion opportunities. Sports events and competitions of all kinds and disciplines held in every place, both public and private, are suspended. However, it is permitted to carry out the aforementioned events and competitions behind closed doors or outdoors without the presence of the public. These postponed matches caused a major logistical problem for Serie A clubs. With most matches being punted down the line to sometime in May, for teams such as Inter, that could mean that they would have to play a ludicrous amount of matches. The league initially rescheduled the weekend's round of fixtures for Wednesday, May 13th. The cup final has been pushed back to May 20th, even though Serie A was supposed to hand over the Stadio Olimpico to Uefa 2 days earlier so they can prepare it for the opening game of Euro 2020 on June 12th. In that scenario, Inter could have 9 games in May. Juventus potentially face 7. So Serie A has a mess on its hands, a mess that could get worse and worse for them, with the only solution being to play matches behind closed doors for the foreseeable future. But as the world is a global village and viruses such as COVID-19 spread easily, very easily, the delays have now spread to UEFA competitions. On March 5th, 2020, UEFA announced that 2 European competition matchups would be played without fans in attendance as a preventative measure. The Champions League matchup of Valencia versus Atalanta, which is actually being played in Valencia, will be played behind closed doors as Atalanta come from the Lombardy region of Italy, one of the COVID-19 hotspots. On top of this, Inter versus Getafe, to be played in Milan, will be played behind closed doors as well. Do not be surprised if you see Getafe players taking similar measures to those of the Ludogorets squad that only removed their masks when they took to the pitch, basically. They had it on the rest of the time they were in Milan. Looking forward to Euro 2020? Sure, you could always move the matches from Rome, one of the host cities, to another host city in another country, but with the way the virus is spreading, it's a worrying thought. The 14-day incubation period, as mentioned, makes the tracking of the virus's trajectory difficult, and with millions of fans and players packing airports, hotels, public transit, and more, you wonder if it may get worse before it gets better, as we are seeing in Germany, and if UEFA will be forced to postpone their tournaments if other countries have outbreaks like that seen in Italy. It's a strange place to be in. Sure, it may only be deadly to the elderly and people with pre-existing conditions, but in hosting these tournaments and competitions, they could be actively contributing to the spread of the virus, which is killing some people. UEFA, meanwhile, is preaching calm, even though the prospect of the crisis going into extra time and overlapping with Euro 2020 must be keeping UEFA chief Alexander Ceferin up at night. 3 million tickets have been sold for games across 12 nations. The cumulative global TV audience is expected to reach 5 billion people. COVID-19 looms large. And you can keep up with everything in the world of football on The Athletic, the best place to read about your favorite competitions from the world's best football journalists. James Horncastle brings regular coverage of the Serie A to The Athletic, to go with in-depth coverage of the Bundesliga, Premier League, Champions League, MLS, and more. Plus, The Athletic has an ever-expanding roster of exclusive podcasts hosted by world-renowned journalists, analysts, and experts. The chart-topping Ornstein and Chapman podcast, Zonal Marking, Total Soccer Show, and more look at football at large, while there are plenty of team-specific Premier League podcasts for that thorough, team-by-team coverage. So if you want to support Rabona TV and get access to some of the best journalism available to you right now, then head over to www.theathletic.com/RabonaTV to get a free 7-day trial and 40% off of your annual fee. That's all, guys. That's it for this collaboration. Thanks so much for watching. I've been Adrian. You've been very generous with your time, and I'll hopefully see you in the next video. Take care of yourself.